You're listening to the Nonprofit State of Minds podcast, an Angel Oak creative production.
Hey everybody, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Welcome to our latest episode of the Nonprofit State of Minds, where we pick the brains of nonprofit leaders and really try to stay on top of things that are going on in the nonprofit sector. This is I think our fourth season, which is crazy to think about, but this is really cool. Getting started on that, we have one of our first guests of the year here to continue the stable of great guests that we've had. We have Rose Tatum, who is CEO and founder of Volunteer Leadership Lab. So welcome, Rose.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm also excited to be kicking off 2026 with you.
Oh, well, we're excited too. So thank you for being here. Rose and I met in Wilmington, which is where she's at the Harrelson Center, which is a center focused on supporting nonprofits in the Wilmington, North Carolina area. It's an amazing organization. I think at any given time, they're probably working with 40 or more nonprofits, helping equip them to succeed. And I'm a huge fan. We've been down there to do some events and some trainings and things on behalf of Angel Oak. And at one of those, I met Rose and we connected, and she had what I thought were some interesting things to say about volunteerism and other topics. So invited her to be on the show, and she graciously accepted. So we're grateful that you were able to take some time and talk to us today.
I'm happy to be here. And in fact, I was talking to the executive director of the Harrelson
Yeah.
Center, just an hour and a half ago. She told me to tell you hello, and she said that
Oh,
she's
well,
been on
thanks.
this podcast in the past. So now that's an episode I want to go back to and listen.
Oh, she did. Yes, that was a couple of years ago. Probably time to catch up with her again. Well, that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about, what intrigued me about the work that you're doing. It's really focused on volunteerism, really focused on equipping organizations to be kind of optimized, right, for working with volunteers and stewarding volunteers and all of those things. And most of our clients we work really closely with around things like fundraising and branding and communications. But many of them are super dependent on volunteers. We have some who have thousands of volunteers that they work with on a weekly basis that help them run their missions. So it's critically important, to understand how do you attract, engage, steward, all of those things. And this, I think, will be a great conversation for organizations that do rely on or want to rely more on volunteers. Tell us a little bit about how you got here, how you got to this place today, and just kind of that journey to getting into the nonprofit sector work.
Yeah, this is a story I love to hear of anyone that works in the nonprofit world, because there's always a moment in your life when you decide that this is the way you're going.
This
So
is the
very,
way.
yeah, so very few of us come directly into adulthood or directly out of college and decide we want to work in the nonprofit sector. There's generally a moment, just something that happens that turns the corner for you. But for me, there's a handful of things that happened, but briefly, growing up, I grew up with an immigrant single mom. We relied heavily on the community and the organizations within our community to help us survive. Like there was
Yeah.
so many organizations that helped us throughout the years. And so when I became an adult, it was really important to me to volunteer and give back to those that had given so much to us over the years. And I worked at a bank here locally in Wilmington called Cooperative Bank that's no longer with us, for most of my 20s. And I was intending on sticking with the bank and working my way up. And I was in the accounting department, and I had been tasked with organizing some employee volunteer events and getting our staff out into the community and volunteering their time. And that was the best part of my job. Like
Yeah.
I like really enjoyed being out there and doing that. And so at some point, I decided I'm going to use all of my vacation time, my whole 10 days, and I'm going to go volunteer with a small organization abroad. And I found this small Peruvian organization called Awaiting Angels,
Mm,
um, ran by a woman named Jenny Torres. And I went to Peru and volunteered
wow.
for my vacation. And it wasn't like one of those volunteerist type things. I actually stayed with Jenny and her husband and her mother and their child, and then I volunteered in the community with her organization. And coming back from that experience on the flight back, I thought, I've got to do something different.
Yeah.
And I came
Epiphany
back.
there, huh?
Yeah, it was in 2007, summer of 2007. I came back and I talked with my direct supervisor and then the CFO of the bank that I worked directly under, and said, they were so supportive about what I was doing. They sent me with a bunch of school supplies for kids, and they were like, loved that I was doing it. When I came back, I was like, I think I've got to go back to school. I want to go into the nonprofit world, and I think I want to go to school full time. And so talked to them. I decided in January is when so I'd be with them until the end of the year and then work part-time going into the new year so I could go to school full time. And then 2008 came, the market crashed, the bank
Yeah.
was shut down by the FDIC.
Wow.
And it was like so serendipitous for me. Like it was like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it was all meant to be. And so, yeah, that kind of kicked off my nonprofit journey. I went to school, studied international studies with a focus in conflict mediation and peace building and human rights, but also nonprofit management.
Yeah.
And then ended up coming back to Wilmington. I was planning on working international, but my family here needed me. I came back to Wilmington, started working in the nonprofit sector here. And yeah, did that for several years, and then moved away for a few years, worked for an international organization where I was able to develop and scale really work on scaling the volunteer program, bringing structure to it and scaling the volunteer program. And we were able to grow that volunteer program to over 23,000 volunteers from
Wow.
130 different countries. And it was such a unique experience. I went from doing that on a local, like leading volunteer programs on a local level to leading something globally, and was so large. So when I moved back to Wilmington a year ago now, I had been thinking about the Volunteer Leadership Lab for quite a long time and how I can help nonprofits with the knowledge that I have develop and build strong strategic volunteer programs. And so when I got here, I decided to launch, and that's when I met you,
Wow.
right at that time when I was launching it.
Very fortuitous timing.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, it's always interesting to hear people's journey. And yes, you're right. Um, I can probably count on one hand people who actually, charted a path towards nonprofit, right? As opposed to those who kind of stumbled into it or kind of ended up there unintentionally. So,
Right.
um, well, let's thank you for sharing that, and let's talk a little bit about what's happening today and its impact on volunteerism. If um, I can't count how many conversations I've had in the last few months about government funding cuts and all of those things that are happening in the sector that are causing nonprofits to really rethink everything from their philanthropic strategies to volunteerism to just even operations in general. How do they manage through these times? What is the impact of the current, kind of state of the sector on volunteerism, on organizations who rely so heavily on volunteers or may need to now?
Yeah, it's just really driving a lot of financial instability across the nonprofit sector. And I think it's a little over half of federal funded nonprofits are reporting that that is the case. And it's pushing organizations really into this survival mode, which
Yeah,
means that they are reducing staff. They are cutting programs. They're delaying or canceling initiatives, all due to these funding cuts. And at the same time, the public awareness of the cuts is actually quite low. There was a report, it's the Donor Trust report, comes out every year, and they do a survey every year, and they're reporting that around 32% of the public is actually aware of the funding cuts, which
wow.
means that's what 68% of the public doesn't actually,
Hmm.
are not even aware that there are government funding cuts that are impacting nonprofits. And so there's that gap really
Yeah,
between like what reality is and then what the public understanding of that is.
yeah,
And that puts a lot of pressure on our organizations, and then, at the same time, the public and our communities may not understand why our services being cut, why our organizations strained. So I was trying to like really get a grasp on the number, like what are we really talking about, how much
yeah,
money is being cut. And what I do know is that federal funding to nonprofits is really distributed through hundreds of separate grant programs,
yeah,
contracts, agreements across dozens and dozens of agencies. And there's really no public available resource that provides like the exact dollar amount for federal funding cuts. But we know it's in the billions and
yeah.
it's affecting lots of different organizations. For instance, this morning I was at a Creative Mornings event,
Oh, yeah,
and the speaker was the executive director of Kids Making It. His name's Kevin Blackburn, and that's here, a local organization here in Wilmington. It's a woodworking program for
yeah,
at-risk youth, but they do really so much more than that. And so, as he was speaking, someone asked about funding, like where do they get their funding? And first thing he said is that they ex- in, uh, just experienced a government funding cut of $200,000 to their program. So
yeah,
you're thinking this is a Wilmington-based nonprofit organization. It's a woodworking program for at-risk youth in
right.
our community, and it is seeing $200,000 cut from its funding.
Yeah,
So I also went to a volunteer training with Church World Service last night,
yeah,
and Audrey, who does a little bit of everything there for this region, had talked about how, just a few years ago, they had 26 staff members and they scaled that way back down. I can't remember the number, but I feel like it was around 4 to 5 people. So that
yeah.
was a lot of people
Wow.
that lost a job, which also meant, they do refugee resettlement. So of course,
Yeah,
they're seeing huge, significant cuts in funding.
yeah,
And they have to rethink, like, okay, we're not resettling new refugees, but we still have all of the refugees that we've already resettled, and we're still supporting them. So
yeah,
now, how do we get funding to do that, and how do we manage these programs and these services with a significantly smaller staff?
yeah. No, we're seeing that so much. It's just, yeah, I've had a conversation this week with someone who lost almost half of their funding of a $1.4 million budget because of the federal and state cuts. So it's how do you recover from that, and then but yeah, talk about what role volunteers what through what lens can nonprofits look at volunteerism to help address some of those concerns around budget cuts and other, other changes that are going on out there?
Yeah, I see it. There's a handful of ways that volunteers can really be of service more than ever to now more than ever to our nonprofit organizations. Um, so one, there's that growing trust and demand for accountability in our organizations, right? And part of that is why there's this push for funding cuts.
Yeah,
And what's driving that is misinformation and disinformation and a change in public perception of nonprofit organizations. I see volunteers first and foremost as ambassadors and advocates for your organization. So bringing volunteers into your organization and ensuring that they are trained well, that they have a good understanding of your nonprofit, and then they're seeing it firsthand how your organization runs behind the scenes, how it's operating and what services it's providing and how it actually is able to provide those services, what's necessary to make that happen, how
right.
this program delivery happens, where the funding's coming from, how it's used, and who's needed in order to actually, the people who are needed to actually make that happen. Once volunteers are brought into that system and they have a good understanding and they're supported and have that training and that orientation, that knowledge, and roles within the organization that give them that accessibility, then they have the knowledge to go out there in the community and talk and
Yeah.
advocate on your behalf. So they're talking to their neighbors, they're talking to the community at large. They can talk to your local representatives and government. They can talk to different funders. So they are really the ones who are going to be key to rebuilding that trust in our nonprofit sector.
Yeah. They really act as ambassadors, right? They really
Right.
act as your advocates out, in the real world that,
Right.
because I think our experience is that, nonprofits run extremely lean in all areas, right? And Angel Oak, we look at a lot of things through the lens of communication and information and engagement and all of those things. And um, I think nonprofits um, don't understand the power of kind of word of mouth, right? They don't understand the
Mhm.
power of how having, I mean, if you have even if you have a few hundred volunteers or maybe even 100 volunteers, right? That's 100 individuals who can speak to 2 to 3 other individuals about your organization, probably in a given week or even, maybe even a day that you don't have the capacity to talk to, right? And
Right.
how do you equip them? How do you cultivate them to be willing and able to because they're going to talk about you anyway, right? Because
Right.
somebody's going to say, "What did you do today?" "Oh, I went and volunteered at the Harrelson
Right.
Center." Okay,
Right.
well, what is that? What's the Harrelson Center? So, giving them the tools and the things they need to communicate clearly who what you do and what your mission is so critical. And to your point, I think, you know, being intentional about developing a program that stewards that is something that I think, again, I never want to victim blame nonprofits, right? Because I mean they're struggling
Yeah,
with so many challenges,
they
but
are.
it is kind of, to me, it is kind of low hanging fruit. You've already got the volunteers, you've already got, the information. How do you bring those two together, right? So what's your experience? What's your, advice? What's your counsel to people, to nonprofit leaders who they may have a fairly strong existing volunteer program, but they're just really not optimizing it for all its purposes. I mean, maybe they're doing a great job helping to run their thrift store or to help run their feeding program, but what else could they be doing?
Yeah, I will use the international organization I worked with as an example for this specific reason. We had to grow our volunteer base quickly to serve the need of those we were serving. So it was a demand we had. One of the things I did was create an ambassador program where our current volunteers who were already engaged in our program could take on an ambassador role. So it was a little bit more of a leadership role, but it
Yeah.
didn't require a whole lot of their time. What I did is I created an ambassador toolkit, and that
Yeah.
gave them everything they needed to, all the information and tools that they needed to go out into the community and talk to other people about our organization. And I did a brief training. I did that training virtually, and I had a
Yeah.
pre-recorded video.
Yeah.
So they had some options on how they could do it, and it could be done on their time, whatever was convenient for them. And basically gave them what they needed, the knowledge and the tools that they needed and the training they needed to be able to go out into the community and talk about the organization and what the organization needed for support, whether we needed more volunteers, we needed donors, we needed people to get involved to advocate for
Yeah.
our organization and our cause. We were serving Ukrainians after the full-scale invasion, so there was a need there for
Yeah.
there to be some advocacy beyond our organization. And so it was really about training. So I think with volunteers in general, if you really want your volunteers to be successful and you want them to serve your organization in the way that you need them to serve your organization, you need to think strategically about it.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a plan in place. You need to have structure, and you need to create ways to support your volunteers in
Wait a
doing
minute. There needs to be a plan.
a
What's a
plan.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I say that facetiously, right? And it's funny when we do, kind of the web, and I think you may have been there when we did this, maybe or maybe not. This is a different subject, but one of the things we did at the Harrelson Center, we did a training, kind of a marketing 101 kind of thing for nonprofits, and one of the first questions I ask is, how many of you have a marketing plan, right?
Mhm.
Like 1 out of 20 raise their hand, right? And
Yeah.
I'm guessing that you would probably, if you were to ask, how many of you have a volunteer engagement strategy or plan? My guess is you'd probably have the same number, right? And again,
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't say this to shame any nonprofits. There's no shame here, but it's just an observation that that whole attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? If you don't
Right.
have a strategy, you're kind of shooting in the dark, maybe not use violent imagery here. You're stumbling around in the dark, looking for the path forward as opposed to having a light that can cast in front of you and say, here's where you're going, right? So
Right.
talk
Right.
about that plan, if you would, real quick. Just kind of how do you even get started on something like that? What is that? Obviously they could call you, right, to help do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
That's one of
That's
the things.
exactly what I do. Well, first, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that I know nonprofits are strained on
Yeah.
time, and things like marketing plans and volunteer engagement plans are kind of, put to the
They're on the
side.
wish list, right?
Yeah,
They're on the
they're on
wish
the
list.
wish list. They're not like, we have to get this done today.
Right.
And when you have limited staff and so much to do, that's not taking precedence. I understand that.
Yeah.
But in the long run, when you're thinking about the outcomes of doing it, it
Right.
really serves your organization to have these things in place. So when there's a lot of great resources out there that can kind of help you get started on doing that. I'm a consultant for nonprofits, and the way that I specifically focus on strategically planning and creating systems for volunteers within nonprofit organizations. And so The first thing I think that's important when you're thinking about developing a plan for volunteers is one, to list any and all roles that you would want volunteers to serve in. And that's
Yeah.
not just direct service or program delivery. What are unique things that volunteers could do that would really take some things off of your plate?
Yeah.
You
At
have,
capacity, right?
right. If you're, yeah, you want to increase your capacity, and there's all these things. Creating a marketing plan could be a great volunteer role, right?
Yeah.
Because you could look specifically for a volunteer that's got the skills to do that. That could be something that's taken off your plate. So thinking creatively and going beyond service delivery on what volunteers can do for your organization. And then once you have that list, creating role descriptions for each one of those, what you would need and expect from a volunteer when it comes to each one of those roles.
Yeah.
Right? And then think about how many volunteers you need for each one of those roles. And then where are you going to recruit those volunteers from? That's where creating a volunteer recruitment plan comes into place. I
Yeah.
think that you should create one every year at the beginning of the year and then update it throughout the year as your needs change.
Yeah.
So that you're not recruiting for volunteers reactively. Like, oh no,
We need 30 people to
we
try to
need
come in
30
here. Yeah.
people
Right.
tomorrow. Where are we going to get them?
Right.
Putting some planning in place, some forethought into what you have coming up in the next year and what you project your needs will be and how volunteers can help you serve that and where you get them.
And Rose, isn't there something to be said in that strategic approach that thinking of volunteers as more than just bodies, right?
Right.
That and we'll talk about the other part of this, which is the financial potential opportunity, but more so, that these most of the volunteers, or many, I shouldn't say, many of the volunteers that people get are maybe retired professionals, right? Or
Right.
maybe they're people who have had a career and now they're looking for other things to do, or maybe they're, just looking to expand their service opportunities. They bring other skills, they bring other energy to the organization. And so when you're able to have a plan in place, you can actually try to find the right people for the right fit, right? Versus just like, oh my gosh, we got to get a body in here. Is that
Right.
true or not?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very true. Yeah. That reactive way of approaching volunteer recruitment tends to lead to you not having volunteers that stick around if they
Oh
even
yeah.
show up,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Or
true.
they come one time and then you never see them again. But when you're taking a more strategic approach and finding like an actual really good fit for each role, and then supporting them, creating a system that supports them, then you tend to keep your volunteers around longer,
Yeah.
get more experience within your organization. They become great advocates and ambassadors for your program. And then what you were hinting to is that when you increase your volunteer base to, these dedicated volunteers who are sticking around for, a longer duration of time, um, reporting consistently shows that 70% of dedicated volunteers donate to the organizations that they
Wow.
serve with.
Say that one more time. I really want people to hear that.
70% of dedicated volunteers donate to the organizations they serve with.
Wow.
And volunteers, those dedicated volunteers that we're talking about, are twice as likely than non-volunteers to donate more than $1,000 to your organization.
Wow. That's huge. Say that one again.
So volunteers who are dedicated volunteers to your organization are twice as likely as non-volunteers to donate over $1,000.
Yeah. And who doesn't like donors who give $1,000 or more, right? I
Right,
mean, that's kind of
right.
that's kind of the holy grail, is to find those kind of donors. So
Yeah,
real quick, so I'm going to vent a minute if you'll allow me.
yeah.
Um, I've had a number of organizations say to me, we don't want to ask our volunteers for money.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if I had hair, I would pull it out. Uh, it would, it just, I almost scream when I hear that. Am I wrong? Am I wrong to be upset about that statement?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is what I would say about that is that it's all about how you do it, right?
Right.
So it's not, I don't think that having constant fundraising ask of your volunteers is the way to go. But
Right.
I think it is about genuine communication and transparency and trust with your volunteers. So when you're having those genuine conversations with your volunteers and you're communicating clearly what type of funding your organization has, how it's used, and how you need additional funding to do XYZ,
Right.
and that's why donations are important. It's not necessarily about a continuous ask of your volunteers. Not all
Mhm.
volunteers, some people volunteer because they don't have the money to give, and that's the
Right.
thing of giving.
Exactly.
And we know that. But it's about ensuring that all your volunteers have a clear understanding of what your needs are financially and what you have to do to get to
Yeah.
fulfill those needs.
And
And
I
part
think,
of that is making it easy and accessible for them to donate whenever they want to donate, and clearly communicating your needs.
yeah, and some research we've done, as well as research I've read over the years, have said that, volunteers want to be invited to participate and deepen the relationship with the organization, right?
Yeah,
They want to at least be asked, and they're not offended by that ask either, from what research shows. Most don't respond, well, I'm already giving you my time, you want my money, right? They don't, that's not the result of an invitation. It's more about them saying, okay, I'm not able to give financially, so I'm going to continue to give of my time. And I'm going
right.
to tell other people about it. I'm going to do other things because I believe in it. And then there are those 70% who say, you know what? I am going to give financially because I believe deeply in this and I want to continue to support this organization that has given me so much personal satisfaction in doing the service that I get to do, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
um,
Exactly.
yeah, well,
Exactly.
I hope, I hope organizations really lean into that part of it. Um, what, what is that? Talk about a little bit, and we're gonna have to wrap up here soon, but talk a little bit about that connection between the volunteering, the belonging, community well-being. What does that look like? We've talked about how this is good for the organization. We've talked about kind of how this is good from a financial standpoint, but what does this mean? What does this do for the volunteer, for the community?
Yeah, so what we know, research also tells this, and I know a lot of our nonprofits are aware of this as well, but I think it's knowledge on the nonprofit side, but I don't think it's knowledge that's actually shared with our community at large or used in our messaging when we're recruiting volunteers and trying to
Yeah.
attract volunteers to our organization. But it's really great for health. One, the loneliness epidemic is
And we're talking
only
about the health of the volunteer, right?
health of the volunteer
Right.
and the health of your community.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the loneliness epidemic is growing. And
Yeah.
now research is showing that it once was mostly our seniors that were experiencing that significant loneliness. And now it's our younger generations that are
Hmm.
reporting loneliness at a higher level than our seniors. So volunteerism is a way to you know address that issue, creating that
Yeah.
meaningful social connection, giving
Yeah.
people an opportunity to make friends and get to know other people within their community by working alongside them, doing something good through volunteerism.
Yeah.
Um, and then when we're talking about like physical health, it is known to like really volunteering regularly is known through research and reporting to really help with other physical health issues, heart
Yeah.
issues, those kinds of things. So there's some really great benefits there. But then when we're talking about our communities and we're thinking about how there's this kind of divide that's just continuously building through us, and we're talking to our neighbors less, and we're like getting engaged in our communities less. And I'm not talking, when community engagement, I'm not just talking about volunteering and nonprofits,
Yeah.
but like just getting out there and doing something nice for our neighborhood,
Right.
um
And
uh,
shoveling the snow off their sidewalk like
exactly.
we've needed to do here in Raleigh lately. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. I think that volunteerism is a really great way to bring people together for a shared cause from different walks of life.
Yeah.
It's a really great way to bridge that gap, bring people together, start conversations, finding things in common instead of things that separate us, and
Mm.
making our community stronger because of that.
Yeah. Boy, do we need that today, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, when you're, and we do some volunteer work through Angel Oak and independently as well. And, when you're working together towards a similar mission, a lot of other issues kind of take a back seat, right? Whether it's politics or faith or whatever it is, it's more about how are we working together to create something or to solve something or to build something. And it truly does create that relationship that goes deeper than those superficial topics that are so prevalent today in social media and other places. It's that, to your point, that human connection. Um, when you're more intimately connected to someone, it's a lot harder to be mean, right? It's a lot harder
Right.
to to do those things. So
Yeah.
volunteerism is a great way, I think, to bring us all together, no matter what the cause is, no matter what that is, but bring us all together in a way that makes us all better, right? And I feel like I need to sing Kumbaya or something here, but you know, well, well, Rose, thank you so much for your time today. Give us one thing that folks who are listening should really take away from this. What is kind of one thing you really want them to hear?
Well, one thing I would like them to hear is that um, to lean on your volunteers through this difficult time,
Hmm.
and um, to think about ways that you can strategically improve your volunteer program to utilize volunteers more effectively in building your capacity, and um, maybe even creating different funding streams and filling in gaps where maybe you don't have staff support. So just thinking about volunteer programs and volunteerism on a more strategic and deeper level.
Yes.
Yeah.
For whatever it's worth, I second that and encourage people. If they want to find out more about you and the Volunteer Leadership Lab, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, volunteerleadershiplab.com. You can email me at rose@volunteerleadershiplab.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. So feel free to reach out to me. You want to have some coffee, meet virtually, or just chat about all things volunteers. I love just having conversations with people and learning from our different organizations and those who lead volunteers, what's working for them and what's not, and how I can potentially help. And I do want to mention one thing.
Sure.
I'm working with the Harrelson Center in partnership with them. We applied for a grant to do a program under them. So if you're a nonprofit in the Wilmington area, this will be of use to you. Hopefully, if we get approved, we'll see.
Yes.
We're but we're working on a in-person volunteer hub and online platform to connect volunteers to nonprofit organizations here in Wilmington. And I'll be putting together a plan to do an annual volunteer impact report for New Hanover County. So those are two things that can be looking forward to the
Oh, that's
future.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed on the grant, definitely, and hopefully that will come through. Well, good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Always a blessing to have folks tune in to our nonprofit State of Minds podcast. If you want more information about Angel Oak, angeloakcreative.com. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and look forward to engaging with folks there, and encourage people to volunteer, to also to take advantage of the opportunity to be strategic about your volunteer engagement. And if you have any questions about that, please do reach out to Rose. I highly recommend it. Everything I've read and seen so far has just been really impressive. So thank you for all you do, Rose, to make our sector better. We're grateful for that.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate having the opportunity to chat with you today.
Well, thank you. We look forward to staying in touch. Take care now.
You too.